You're still watching Eastern Business Report right here on the Afia Business Morning. Nigeria and Brazil have just taken a significant step in deepening their economic ties, signing 5 MoUs spanning aviation, agriculture, science, and energy. On the surface, these agreements signal opportunity, but what do they really mean for the average Nigerian, especially in the southeast? Today, we will explore whether this marks the new start of a new era of cooperation. Joining me now in the studio to talk about this is Dr. Mobi, an economist. You're welcome on the program, sir.
Thank you.
5 MoUs signed. How do you feel about it? I want to get your thoughts, your opinion on this, and what this means for us as a nation.
Well, on the surface, it's actually positive. Positive in the sense that it's not very often that a presidential team travels abroad and is able to sign 5 MoUs, in one visit. So one can say kudos to the president and his team. On the other hand, if you now look into the MoUs themselves and the areas that they actually cover, which are significant, areas and sectors of the economy, you tend to realize that not all of them are really actual MoUs. Most of them are what I would call framework agreements, partnership agreements, as opposed to direct MoUs. They're still from under the same MoU, space. However, there are differences in the sense that not all of them have direct, foreign direct investment impact in Nigeria at the moment. And so if you take, one of them, like trade cooperation, for instance. Trade cooperation is an MoU that will enhance trade and commerce between Nigeria and Brazil. It's not a project, so you can't say this is how much is going to go into it. It's just to open up the windows and open up the doors better for Nigerian companies and Brazilian companies to cooperate in trade and have a free flow of goods and services going back and forth between Nigeria and Brazil. So it's an agreement in a sense. But then, you can say it's an MoU, but without any direct monetary, tags to it. Science, technology, and innovation is a bit more direct. You can get, you can actually dollarize it and say yes. If there's cooperation in research and development, in, new science, and innovation space, yes, that can attract Brazilian companies into Nigeria to come and invest, in our energy sector and, areas like that. Yes, that is good because it also opens up those doors. But there's no direct project yet. There are no companies that are saying, yes, we're going to come in and we're going to do this. So you can't say it's a 1 billion naira or $1 billion MoU per se. That's why I call them, framework agreements. Finance and agriculture is another good one because in as much as if you look at the details of the MoU itself, the agriculture is a cooperation between Bank of Agriculture in Nigeria and their own equivalent of the Brazil's own Bank of Agriculture. So it's a cooperation between the two banks that can now flesh out projects and areas of cooperation between Nigeria and Brazil. So there's really no direct, just like in science, there isn't any direct investment yet. So you can't say this how much is going to come into Nigeria. Everything depends on what each country now brings to the table and how they can, negotiate this cooperation. Then you have another one that they signed, which was more political. I think they called it political consultations and diplomatic training or something like that, whereby it's just, staff training, staff exchanges between Nigeria and Brazil. Good, it opens doors for, interaction, but it's not really an investment per se. I mean, you train staff, they go back and forth. Good. Then the aviation, the cooperation in the aviation sector, that's a direct FDI because now you have the BASA, the bilateral service agreement, a service agreement between Nigeria and Brazil that has now opened up a window or a channel for direct flights between Lagos and Sao Paulo. And so you have Air Peace, for instance, now on the Nigerian side that has now been given a green light, now start making arrangements. It's not as if Air Peace is going to start flying tomorrow. There are so many other things that have to be done, including getting routing and all, etc. But that avenue has been created. On the Brazilian side, Brazil manufactures airplanes, the Embraer, If they can come in and set up a maintenance, repair, overhaul facility service center in Nigeria, that could transfer skills and technology into Nigeria, create jobs, and also be good for Nigerian economy. So that one also has a direct FDI impact. And so it's good, like I said, but we shouldn't just, start clapping and say, 5 MoUs, money is going to start coming in. No, there's still a lot that has to be done between the next 6 to 12 to even 18 months before we can even start seeing any type of benefits to Nigeria.
Yeah, practically speaking, would you say this is a new era of economic cooperation between the two countries?
It's a renewed area because Nigeria, Brazil, we've always had that cooperation. In the past, there have been direct flights between Nigeria and Brazil via Varig, which is the Brazilian airline at the time, and Nigeria Airways then. Varig suspended its operations into Nigeria in the 90s, and so there was that lull. Then in the oil and gas sector, about 5 years ago, the Brazilian oil company, Petrobras, left Nigeria also for certain business operation reasons on their own side. And so there was that gap of inactivity between Nigeria and Brazil, which is now being renewed as a result of this visit.
Yeah, still talking about the MoUs and Tinubu's visit to Brazil. President Tinubu is urging Petrobras to return to Nigeria. These people left Nigeria, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Why did these people leave? That's my first question. Do you think they will return to Nigeria? That's my second question. And what different impact will this make?
Well, first and foremost, Petrobras did not leave Nigeria because of anything Nigeria did. Petrobras left Nigeria because at home, their parent company was having some operational issues, financial, problems, for lack of a better word, at home. And so it affected their operations, globally, of which Nigeria was one of them. So they had to downsize, they had to cut down on the operations, and they had to, shut down the Nigerian operations here. And so Petrobras had to leave. In the last 5 years, they've been able to now, streamline, sort themselves out, focus on their core business, etc. And they want to now re-enter the global market. So if they say they're going to come back to Nigeria, chances are they will come back to Nigeria. There's still a huge opportunity in the deep sea, oil and gas sector, contracts, etc., which Petrobras has been operating in or had been operating in the past. In terms of whether it will have much of an impact in the Nigerian economy, it's still, it's too early to say. And also, it is not going to be that direct because even while they were here in the past, they weren't really a major player like Total or Shell or, Exxon. And so they'll still come in, they'll still be at that fringe, mid-level for now until they can now grow within the Nigerian oil and gas sector. So it's not going to have much of an impact, but it's still good optics and it's still good that the relationship is being renewed at this time.
All right, let's bring it down to the Southeast. What does this MoU signed in Brasilia mean to the Southeast? Does it really matter to us? And, can these agreements filter down to the Southeast?
The Southeast is still part of Nigeria. And so, however it affects Nigeria, it will affect the Southeast. Does it have a direct impact in the Southeast? I wouldn't say there is a direct impact. Because now, if we take the MOUs, for instance, now, trade cooperation is national, it's between Nigeria and Brazil. Now, it's up to the Southeast states and the companies within the Southeast to now, have goods or services that they can export to Brazil and take advantage of that window that has been created through the MOU. So it's more on what do we have to offer to the world? What products do we have in the Southeast that we can sell? Now, on the diplomatic training and political, not really much in terms of the Southeast. It's a federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Abuja and their own Ministry of Foreign Affairs that will cooperate on that. Aviation, we could say yes, because Air Peace is actually a Southeast based, even though they're in Lagos, but it's Southeast owned. So that can have positive effects. On agriculture, yes, but we must have something that we're going to offer. What do we produce in the Southeast agriculture-wise? And also, how can we take advantage of the financing that will be provided, project financing and agriculture financing that will be provided through that MOU. But we also have to be careful because the finance aspect of it, I would predict would come mostly from Brazil, which means that almost every finance coming into the agriculture MOU will come from the banks in Brazil, which would increase our own debt because we will have to borrow and pay interest on any funding that we get from there. So if we all jump at it, even with our overblown debt today, we will even be borrowing more as a country. So we have to be mindful and cautious when we now start implementing that.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Amobi. When we talk about the Southeast, we talk about Ebonyi in terms of agriculture. They have rice. Aba is like the commercial hub of the South. It's not just the South, it's Nigeria as a whole. When we talk about Enugu is trying to position itself as a tech hub. And, we see these things in the MOUs, part of the MOUs signed in Brazil. How can Southeast leaders, how can the governors position themselves to benefit from these deals?
Well, first and foremost, the South, well, not just the Southeast, but Nigeria is an almost 200 million population. And so there's a huge domestic demand for anything that is produced in Nigeria. That's why we still import rice. We still import, wheat and flour. We still import basic food items because we don't produce enough. Countries export in excess of what they produce. So you produce X minus domestic consumption, surplus becomes exports. If we increase our productive base in the Southeast and are able to feed our people and not depend on other regions and so on for food, then we will now have enough to put on the global market. So should the governors now pay more attention to that? That will be state government policy. Does the Southeast itself, even with SCDC and all the other mini governments that we're creating within the Southeast, if I can use that word, do we have a Southeast agriculture policy? Do we have a Southeast industrial policy? We don't have these things. And so we still rely on the states, on each state is still doing their own thing individually, for that. Then in terms of yield and output, Nigeria, or rather, let me just say, Brazil is about 9 times the size of Nigeria, land-wise. 9 times. Nigeria is one of the biggest countries in Africa. Brazil is 9 times Nigeria's land size. So you can imagine what they can produce agriculture-wise. We have the land, but we also have the challenges that go with agriculture in Nigeria, insecurity, ecological issues, and so on. So that is a challenge, but we have to make it a deliberate policy, and we have to ensure that we play, at that level. It might not be easy, but we just have to work on it.
Okay, before we let you go, generally, what do you think the federal government or the government of the country should do to make sure that we benefit from this MOU? So it's not just, talks and agreements and signatures.
Well, the federal government has done what it should do, which is open up the doors, open up, the channels, create that opportunity for Nigerians to now tag in. What we should do is to sit back, take these MOUs, dissect them, identify where we can now come in, and then work towards that. Federal government will not go to a state and hold their hand and say, okay, Enugu, come and do this, Ogu, come and do this, Imo, come and do that. No. We, the people of the states, have to now sit down and take these things. I know state governments that have strategy or strategy units or departments within their planning commissions or something like that. This is part of what they should do. When things like this happen, they take these documents, they sit down, they brainstorm for about a day or two, and they say, this is where we can come in, this is what we can gain from it, this is how we can increase our own state GDP based on what we have identified. And then they work towards it. If they have to now work with the federal ministry in Abuja to achieve that, fine. If they have to work through their state representatives or senators in the National Assembly to pass laws that will enable them achieve that, fine. This is how governments work. And so that way, the president and his team they've opened the doors. It's up to us to now step in and take a seat at the table.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ifejura, for joining us on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
And that's the much we can take on the Eastern Business Report today. Till I see you at 10 a.m. tomorrow for another edition of the Afia Business Morning. I am Marvelous Apwamaga, saying enjoy the rest of your day.